good afternoon. Today we are going to be learning about Mendel's laws of genetics. Our objective for today when you leave is to be able to tell me exactly what Mendel did and what his 3 laws of genetics are. Every good lesson has a before, during, and after. I'm going to give you our agenda for today. Before our lesson begins, we are going to complete an anticipation guide. Most of you should be familiar with an anticipation guide. During our lesson, we will be reading out of our textbook, and we will be taking a few notes. After, we will be summarizing everything that we have learned, and we will also be doing the after part of our anticipation guide. Okay, let's start. I have passed out an anticipation guide to everyone. Let's look at the directions. The directions ask if you agree or if you disagree with each statement. Let's do our best to answer these 5 questions. The first question or statement says, genetics involves dominant and recessive factors. Do you disagree or do you agree with that statement? If you agree, put an A. If you disagree, put a D on the before side of the column. The next one asks, Punnett squares can be used to predict the results of a cross. Do you disagree or do you agree with that statement? Put an A if you agree, put a D if you disagree. The third statement states, if you have brown hair, then the genotype for your hair color is brown. Put an A if you agree, put a D if you disagree. Please read the 4th and the 5th statement on your own and write if you agree or disagree. When you are finished, please flip over your anticipation guide to the other side, and you will notice that there is a graphic organizer for summarization. Today we are going to summarize as we read. On the left side of the column, or the T-chart, says interesting details. As we read the passage for today, we will be taking jot notes. Remember, jot notes do not have to be complete sentences. You just simply jot things down to help you remember the interesting details from the passage. After we completed the entire passage, we are going to summarize our learning. I would like for everybody to turn to page 128 in their textbook. Okay, I'm going to model first exactly how I'd like for you to complete this. Remember, good readers sit up straight and tall. They track with their finger to keep up with where we are. Genetics in a garden. Each time Mendel studies a trait, he crossed 2 plants with different expressions of the trait, and he found that the new plant all looked like the 2 parents. These new plants are hybrids because they receive different genetic information or different alleles from a trait from each parent. The results of these studies made Mendel even more curious about how traits are inherited. Garden peas are easy to breed for pure traits. An organism that always produces the same trait generation after generation is called a purebred. For example, tall plants that produce seeds produce tall plants, and they are the purebred trait for the tall height. Table 1 shows other pea plant traits that Mendel studied. At this time, I would like for you to take your pencil and you would write an interesting detail. And one interesting detail that I wrote down when I did this was that Mendel crossed two plants. I also wrote that a hybrid receives two different alleles from each parent. Please jot down one interesting detail that you learned from the passage that I read. If you cannot remember anything, go back to the text to look for an important detail.
Well, plants for their own
So everybody should be writing one important detail down. I will be using my equity cards throughout this lesson. Carson, what is one thing that you wrote down?
Garden peas are easy to breed for purebred traits.
Garden peas are easy to breed for pure traits. Very good. Class?
Yes.
Please put your pencils down and listen to my question. This is the question that I have about this passage. Infer why farmers plant purebred crop seeds. Infer why farmers plant purebred crop seeds. Why do you think the farmers chose the purebred seeds? I want you to talk to your talking partner about why you think farmers chose purebred seeds. Go. Timothy, why can you infer that farmers chose pure seeds when they bred their pea plants?
Just because it's just purebred.
Okay, because it's purebred. What does it mean to be purebred? What kind of traits do you have? Do you have dominant or recessive traits? Dominant. And if we go back to table 1, we see that the dominant trait is tall. So if you had some short pea plants and tall pea plants in the same line, do you think the shorter pea plants would get as much sunlight? No. So do you think that maybe having a dominant pure plant would be more beneficial? Yes. Okay, the next passage that we're going to read is on page 128, and the subtitle is Dominant and Recessive Factors. You and your talking partner are going to read this paragraph together, discuss it, and write down interesting details from the passage. Ready? Go. Hey, it sounds like everybody has finished reading the passage. You need to write down some interesting details from that paragraph that you recall. If you cannot recall it, go back to the text and find something important to write down. You need to pretend as if I have not read the passage and I am going to study off of your paper. What do I need to know from that paragraph? I see a lot of people writing down what dominant is and what recessive is. That's very good. The text has highlighted those two words, so I bet they are very important. Great job. I appreciate that you have written down something. I'm going to give you 5, 4, to finish up your thought, 3, 2, and 1. Please put your pencils down. Can you recall what Mendel did? Can you recall what Mendel did? I want you to think about what Mendel did. You need to go back and look at the text. Go ahead. Right. Excuse me. Right. Can you please recall what Mendel did? What did he do?
I'm not Brian. Brian's not in this class.
Brian's not here today. Sorry. Jasper, go ahead. I thought he was here today. He's in my note cards.
He used cross-pollination to figure out which is dominant and recessive plants.
Great. He used cross-pollination to figure out which plant was dominant and recessive. What type of plants did he use?
He used a tall pea plant.
Pea plants. Yes, he used pea plants. Tabor, how are dominant and recessive factors related?
They both go into one eventually.
Okay, they all go into one what?
One, like, new plant.
New plant. What is the scientific word that we've been using for a new baby or new plant?
Spring.
Offspring, yes. They are the traits that go into an offspring. How many alleles make up your trait for each trait? How many alleles do you have?
2.
2. One from your mother and one from your
Father.
father. Okay? Can you explain how a dominant factor would show up in an allele? Tell me a little bit more about dominant. Explain to me about the dominant factor, Colby, who's not here. Nick, explain to me a little more about the dominant factor or the dominant trait. You can go back to the text if you can't remember.
So it's like if your mom has like brown hair and your dad has like blonde hair or something, whichever one is more dominant, you know, I'd be the one you have like.
Right? The dominant trait dominates. Very good. If I was to write the dominant trait using a uppercase T and a lowercase t, what would my 2 alleles be for the dominant trait? Stefan. A capital T and a capital T. There's one other way to get dominant trait. What would that be?
It would be a capital T and a lowercase t.
A capital T and a lowercase t, because we learned that the dominant trait always blocks out the recessive. Let's turn the page. The next section of the text is using probability to make predictions. This time I would like for you to read this section independently. Please go, and don't forget to go back to your graphic organizer to write down any important details that you've learned. we're reading using probability to make predictions. You should be writing at this time on your graphic organizer. Taylor Dad, can you share with us one interesting detail that you wrote down?
Mendel said almost 30,000 people over a period of 8 years.
Wow, 30,000 pea plants in 8 years. That's pretty fascinating. Okay, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds to finish writing your thoughts. This next question that I have about this passage that we just read is kind of tricky. So I need for you really to pay attention. How would you summarize what you read on probability? How would you summarize probability? If I had no idea what probability is, or what it does, could you tell me, Alexa? What is probability? Something to do with math. Okay, if it has something to do with math, then why was Mendel using it? What does it tell you? Go back to the text and look. The second paragraph. Let's look back and see. So what does probability do? It helps you predict what? Yeah, the chance that something would happen. So how can you predict the outcome of probability? What do you need to know to predict the outcome of probability? Think about if you were pulling marbles out of a bag. What would you need to know in order to predict the probability? Peyton, what do you need to know? You would need to know how many of each is in there, right? Or the percentage. Yes, probability is in percentage. Very good. The next passage that we're going to read is Punnett squares. Before we read Punnett squares, I would like for you to look at the picture, figure 4. Figure 4 says, this snapdragon's phenotype is red. Can you tell what a flower's genotype is for the color? So let's talk about it. What is phenotype? Phenotype is what? Your what?
Physical.
Physical appearance. Remember, we said P and P, right? Phenotype, physical. My phenotype for hair would be blonde hair. Genotype is your 2 alleles. That tells your traits, if you have the dominant or recessive. So by just looking at the red flower, can you tell what type of what its genotype is? Taylor Baca, can you tell what its genotype is? By just looking at it. Do you know what its genotype is? No, for color, right? You have no idea unless you've looked at its Punnett square. Remember, genotype is its two different alleles, one from the mother, one from the father. Let's read about Punnett squares with our partner. Read the next two paragraphs under Punnett squares with your partner and take any jot notes that you may need. You may go. You don't know that I have big, 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 or big, big, little big, blue eyes, brown eyes, and all you know is that I have blue eyes. Okay, you should be writing down an interesting detail. It looks like most of you are almost finished with that. I'm going to give you a few more seconds though. Okay, this time I want you to share at your tables the answer to this question. My question is contrast, genotype, and phenotype. Now, I know we're not used to using harder questioning, so let's talk about what the word contrast means. What does that mean? You're different. Talk about how they're different. So I could just say, talk about how they're different. But we talked about on standardized tests like the ACT or the Explorer, they're not going to probably use the word different, are they? They're going to probably say contrast the genotype and the phenotype of an animal. But I would like for you to talk to your partners or your group about genotypes and phenotypes. I want you to contrast them. Ready, go. Class? Yes. This table and I had a really great conversation. We talked about when you look at me, you don't necessarily know my genotype for eye color. You know my phenotype because it's the physical appearance. You know that my eyes are blue. But my genotype, you do not know what my two alleles were. You don't know if I had two big B's or a big B and a little b. You do not know what my actual traits were. Let's look at the next passage, which says, alleles determine traits. I'm going to read this aloud, but I would like for you to follow along as I read it aloud. Remember, good readers track as they read. They sit up straight and tall and listen. They don't have a pencil in their hand. They're paying attention because I'm going to be asking you some questions regarding this passage. Alleles determine traits. Most cells in your body have 2 alleles for every trait. These alleles are located on chromosomes within the nucleus of cells. An organism with 2 alleles that are the same is called homozygous. For Mendel's piece, this would be written as uppercase T, homozygous for the tall dominant trait, or lowercase t, homozygous for the short recessive trait. An organism has 2 different alleles for a trait is called heterozygous. The hybrid plants Mendel produced were all heterozygous for height, uppercase T, lowercase t. Remember, we have been talking about homozygous and heterozygous. We know that zygous means egg. We know that homo means same, and hetero means different. Lily, what conclusions can you draw about the difference and similarities of homozygous and heterozygous? Do you want me to ask you the question one more time? Okay. What conclusion can you draw about the differences and the similarities of homozygous and heterozygous?
Like, homozygous,
What does homozygous mean?
it means, same egg as
The same, good. And heterozygous means
different.
different. So that's how they're different. But how are they similar? They're both what?
Aren't they like genetic?
Genetics that you get from your parents that make up your 2 alleles. Very good. I'm going to give you a few seconds to take some jot notes down about interesting details. There are several things that I read aloud that I think are important. I think it's important that you know what homozygous is, what heterozygous is. I think it's important that you know most of your cells in the body have 2 alleles. I also think it's important that you know how you can get homozygous and how you can get heterozygous. You use uppercase letters or lowercase letters. If you're running out of room on your graphic organizer, you can write above the interesting details. I love that you're running out of room. That makes me happy. Good job. Just squeeze it in there. We're almost finished with reading. We have 2 more passages left. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Please finish up your sentence and get your pencil down. Another strategy that you can use is to read a question before you read the passage. So this time, I'm going to give you the question that I want you to answer as you read. You and your partner are going to read together and discuss the answer to my question. My question is, what steps are needed to create a Punnett square? Once again, my question is, what steps are needed to create a Punnett square? Now, I just don't want you to say you draw a box and divide it into 4. I want to know exactly how you end up with the offsprings, phenotype, and genotype. Read the small paragraph and look at the chart to help you answer the question. One more time. What steps are needed to create a Punnett square? Ready? Go. You can read with your group.
And I thought it's good for
Well, let's talk about each square that you get your offspring, you take the probability of what you're going to get.
We should say
the parent and the parent phenotype.
we need to know the steps
Okay, I'm going to give you about 20 more seconds to write down anything you need to write down and to discuss with your partners about how you create a Punnett square, or the steps needed to create a Punnett square. Okay, great guys. Class. Yes. At this time, I'd like for you to turn the page and look at our last subheading. And it says Principles of Heredity. Remember our objective, and our objective is listed over on our board. It says identify Mendel's laws of genetics. I would like for you to read this section silently, but please pay close attention to Table 2, where it is his 3 laws or principles that he came up with. We will be talking about these 3 different principles in just a moment. So quickly read this. My question is, how can you summarize these 3 laws in your own words? I would like for you to summarize these 3 laws in your own words. Stephanie, look back over Law 1 and tell me in your own words what his first law was without reading it. Okay. What does that mean? Tell me what it means.
it means like
What is he trying to say there? What do you get from your parents? Your alleles, good. And each parent gives you what? 1 allele. And where are these located? On your chromosome. Good. Law 1 is that the traits are controlled by alleles on the chromosome. Everybody, reread Law 2. Brittany, never read it. Look at me and tell me. Alleles are affected by dominant and recessive. Good. And then the last one. Everybody read over the last one. At this time, I'd like for you to talk in your group about how you can summarize the last law in your own words. Ready, go. All right, what does it say? So do meiosis, you get two separate, you need to set them for each pair.
Taylor, I paid her $2 to do my babies. No, it was my 3 minutes.
Class, I heard some really good responses. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to look on the right-hand side of our graphic organizer, and it says Summary of Learning. Before you begin, I'd like for you to listen to my question. It says, last, summarize what you have read. Make sure you write the main idea or the gist of what you just read. Summarize what you have read. I would like for you to write a short summary in paragraph form. Let's talk about good grammar. How many sentences are in a paragraph? 3 to 5. These sentences have what at the beginning? Capital letter. And what goes at the end of a sentence? Punctuation marks. So at this time, I would like for you to write a summary of learning. Basically, I want you to tell me what we read about. What did we learn about today? Give me the main idea. You can pull interesting details from the left side if you need help writing your summary. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to write a summary. If you cannot remember, what is something you can do to help you? Go back and reread. Go back and look at the text. Yes, that's great. I'll give you a chance to share in just a moment. Just write 3 to 5 sentences about what you want to say. About the whole passage. About the whole section we read today. Let me give you a good example. Taylor has written very good example. It says, we learned about how traits are controlled by alleles, which are on chromosomes. Each allele comes from a mother and a father. She's not done, but that is a very good beginning. You could also talk about Mendel, what he did. Talk about dominant and recessive traits. Homozygous, heterozygous, hybrid, the laws. Okay, class, it looks like everybody is done with their summary. Let's flip back over to the anticipation guide. Go ahead and flip back over to that. I'm going to give you, go ahead and flip over. Good job. All right, I want to see if you agree. I want you to give me a thumbs up. If you disagree, I want you to give a thumbs down. Remember, we do not change what we read before. We are marking in the after column. The first statement states, genetics involves dominant and recessive factors. If you agree, give me a thumbs up. Let me see. Good job. It looks like everybody agrees with that statement. Yes. Genetics involves both the dominant and recessive factor. Everybody should have an A. Let's look at statement 2. Punnett squares can be used to predict the results of a cross. Give me a thumbs up if you agree. Give me a thumbs down if you disagree. Let me see. Ooh. Yes, they are. The answer is agree. Remember, you take a Punnett square and you cross them. That's what you're doing. When you see where the genes line up, that's what you're doing. You're crossing them. Okay, listen to this statement very carefully. If you have brown hair, then your genotype for your hair color is brown. Give me a thumbs up if you agree. Give me a thumbs down if you disagree. I disagree with that statement. Good. The correct answer is disagree. Tell me what word is wrong there. Carson. Genotype. It should be what? Phenotype. And I'm going to use this as a study guide for myself. So if I were you, I would mark out genotype, and on the bottom I'd put phenotype. Remember, phenotype is your physical appearance, P&P, and brown hair is a physical appearance. So I would just take a little jot note and write that down. So when I go back and study for my test, I can see. Number 4. Heterozygous organisms carry the same 2 alleles for a trait. The same 2. Give me thumbs up or thumbs down. Brandon, why don't you give me a thumbs down?
Because homozygous means the same, but heterozygous means different.
Okay? Homozygous means same, but heterozygous means different. So yes, it should say homozygous. So I would disagree with that as well. And I would also take myself a quick jot note on there that it should say homozygous and not hetero. Guide. Number 5. Most cells in your body have 2 alleles for every trait. Give me thumbs up or thumbs down. And yes, that is correct. You need to agree with that. You do have 2 traits. So let's go back to our objective for the day. Let's see if we met our objective. Our objective was identify Mendel's laws of genetics. Give me a thumbs up if you feel like we have met our objective and you can identify Mendel's laws of genetics. Good. It looks like everybody feels like they have a better understanding of Mendel's laws. Thank you so much for your behavior and participating in my class today.
You're welcome.